How you doing? My name is James. Welcome to Kingsfinewoodworking. Today I want to talk about layout tools. When you're doing woodworking, the first thing you have to do, of course, is after you get your lumber, you have to make it square on the edges. It has to be flat, it has to be straight. And once your lumber is ready for woodworking, then you have to transfer all your marks and measurements onto the wood. We call that layout. Layout tools are the most important thing that you really have going for you in terms of getting things accurate for your woodworking. So let me talk about a few layout tools today, and we'll see if that makes sense. So in the process of getting your wood flat and square, you've probably already used some layout tools. You've used some squares to make sure that you have planed it and jointed it so that the edges are square. You've probably also checked to make sure that your wood is nice and flat. And you've been able to sight down it to make sure that there's no twists or any obvious problems with the wood like that. So you've already used some layout tools. All right, so let's start with what not to use if you can help it. Everybody seems to have one of these speed squares or carpenter squares in the shop, or when you get started doing woodworking. This is not a good tool to use. So ideally you wouldn't use this. This is great for carpenters, framers, people who are doing construction on homes, building decks or fences, because you don't need a lot of precision or accuracy. So they're good for that, but they're really not very good for fine woodworking in the shop, even so much as building simple things like outdoor furniture that don't need super high precision or super high accuracy. This is still not the layout tool of choice for drawing straight edges at 90 degrees or for drawing your 45s. They're just never fully square. Now there's going to be a few things that depends on if you have a plastic square or a metal square, and depends on who makes the square and how much you paid for it. The Empire is pretty good. If you happen to have one of these, they're actually not too bad, but a lot of the cheap ones that you get at the big box stores are really inaccurate, and of course if you drop them like people do on construction sites, it's going to ding them, it's going to change things, it's going to possibly change it out of square. So I avoid these in the shop. I don't use speed squares at all. Another tool that I don't like to use is a combination square. This is a tool that I find pretty interesting. A lot of beginning woodworkers will go and get a combination square. The problem with this is unless you're spending the money for something high-end like maybe a Starrett, they're not very accurate. Typically they're going to have some play in them even after you've tightened them down, unless again it's a very high-end tool. And to get a good quality one like a Starrett, you might be paying maybe in excess of $125, $150, and that's a lot of money to spend on a single tool. It's going to be nice and it's going to be accurate, but you can do things for a lot less money. And then the other thing is, a lot of times you're doing a layout where you need to mark a specific distance off an edge like this. I want to come in and mark a distance off of this edge, and this tool is just big and it's awkward, so I wouldn't use this even if I had a Starrett. So I do have one in my shop. I don't know how long I've had this for, just about forever, but I don't really use it. It just kind of sits in the drawer and collects dust. So I wouldn't recommend, if you're still buying tools, I wouldn't recommend getting a combination square. There are better ways to make 45s, and there are better ways to get square cuts, and there are better ways to do layouts along an edge than with a combination square. Okay, so before we start doing any layout, you first have to have some marking pencils to do your layout with. A lot of people just start with a regular pencil, and that's just fine. You can start with a pencil. The problem with a pencil on wood is it doesn't take very much writing before the pencil becomes dull. The duller the tip of your pencil becomes, the wider it is and the bigger and the fatter the line, so the less accurate things are when you're going to do your cutting up next to the edge of the pencil line. If your pencil line is already getting to the point where it's a 1/16 of an inch thick, you don't know where to cut on that pencil line. So these are fine if you want to keep them sharp at all times. They're also kind of thick, so if you have to go down inside of a groove and make a mark, or if you want to transfer like a set of holes from one piece of wood over to another, they don't fit in very well because of their size. So mechanical pencils are a good option. You can get them with 0.5 millimeter or 0.7 millimeter lead, and they'll stay thin, so you're going to continuously draw thin lines. That's kind of nice. They do break a lot, but that's a good option. An option that I choose, that I use a lot, are these Nick Pro pencils. Let me talk about these a little bit. These are really good. They come with, they've got a thin version. You can see the point on that. They get so sharp. It's pretty incredible. And there's a little bit thicker version, but they're really narrow. The cylinder on this is narrow, so you can get inside of a hole and you can make a mark beneath the hole. That's nice. They come with a variety of different pencil lead colors, which is great. So for example, if I have to mark something on dark wood, you see I can make white pencil marks on dark wood. This is something that it's very hard to see pencil marks on, you know, walnut or wenge or purple heart, but if they're regular graphite colored, black, but very easy if they're white. So that's a nice option for something like this. And just the fact that they have a narrow barrel, which is nice. And they have sharpeners. You can make these things extremely sharp. That's very handy. And they're actually not very expensive at all. If you have these, or if you're interested in getting a set of these, I'll put a link in the description down below. It's a good option. A regular old mechanical pencil is a good option too, like I mentioned. And of course, just these work just as good. And you can just simply keep them sharp. And you can even buy these in white so that you can mark on dark wood. I'll put a link to those in the description as well. Okay, so my tool of choice to replace the combination square are a set of double squares. These are made by iGaging. I think they're in the $30 range, maybe around $40 range, I'm not sure. They're a lot less money than a quality combination square, but they're much more handy. It's called a double square, I suppose, because you can get a square off of each side of it. What's nice about these for layout is that, well, not only can you do a square, you can mark a straight line here, but you can set this to a particular depth that you want. Let's say I'm going to cut a tenon off of this end in order to fit it into a mortise. So I might set my tenon up, and I can just run that down this side, and you see I have a mark for my tenon, and we might even just carry that all the way around. This is something that I would use if I were, I would probably have neater edge to my wood there. This is something I would use if I'm going to cut a tenon, is I would want to know where the mark is. I'd cut down to a specific distance all the way around, and I'd have a tenon for me to put into a mortise. So this is nice for that purpose. And then let's say I want to lay out the mortise. These are great for that too. I might take and lay out the area where I want the mortise to go, and if I've got things with two different depths, then I might use two different squares and not have to continually change my square. And that might be the mortise that I want to remove for the tenon to fit into. So it's pretty easy to lay out things like mortise and tenon joints with this, to lay out any line going along an edge. They're pretty much just good for straight lines. If you want to make an angle line, I would go with something like this. This is actually called a saddle square, and it has a pretty accurate 45-degree angle. But you just can set this up against your wood wherever you want and make a 45-degree angle with that. It's just as accurate, if not more accurate, than the combination square, a high-end combination square. And this has another really nice benefit. If, for example, I am drawing a line, I don't know, that comes here, and I want to continue this line around an edge, right? So continue around the edge. Well, what people end up doing is you set this up here, and you try to get this lined up really close to your pencil line, as accurate as you can, before you draw your other line. But with a saddle square, it's easy. With a saddle square, I would just set the saddle square to that mark here, and then it just follows the line around. Same thing this way here, locate it, and this follows the line around. So it's a much more accurate way to wrap around an edge, is with a saddle square. So I use this for my 45s, and I use this for wrapping around edges. Let's say I wanted to wrap around this edge, but I wanted to veer off into a 45-degree angle. That works too. I'll line this edge up. You can actually see it on camera, how that's actually chamfered at 45 degrees right there. So I would line this up to where that touches my line. I can verify it with the pencil there, and then come down here and run my line here. And you can see that comes right up to my 45-degree pencil line there. So that's a good, accurate way to bring a 45 off of a straight line with a saddle square. These are really cheap, and you should definitely have a saddle square. These come in very handy. There's no excuse not to have this. This is going to save you, get you out of a lot of tough situations. Let's say I need a hole placed in this wood and it's got to be exact. I want to come 3 inches down from an edge and maybe 1 inch in from the other edge. So I can set these exactly at 1 inch, and I can set this one exactly at 3. And so then I might just come down here, mark my 3, come over here, mark my 1, and where those 2 points cross, that's where my hole goes. So it's really easy to lay out hole positions very accurately as well with a set of double squares. There are other tools for laying out cuts, like tenon cuts, and a lot of people don't use these, but they're very easy to use. If I wanted to, say, match this and make a tenon over there, make my marks for a tenon, especially if you're going to use chisels. These tools are great. These are called marking gauges. This is our standard Western marking gauge, and it works by holding this edge flush here, and I'm just scraping a line there, and you should be able to see. You typically would scrape these a few times, and you'll generate a line. You can probably see where that line is, and that's really, really accurate because it marks the point with the line rather than a pencil, so the cut has sort of already begun. So these layout squares are pretty nice. There are Japanese versions as well. If I want to do this, they work very similar. This one has 1 or 2. So if I need to mark 2 spots, or if I want to just mark 1 spot, I can. And the setup is the same. I would just bring this over till it just touches that point. And then I may lay this out on the back side and show you. So it's the same thing here. We're going to hold this guy square to the edge, and then we'll just drag across here real slow. Not very much pressure. It just takes a few drags. And you can see it works the exact same way. So these are pretty nice. A nice, quick, and easy way without a pencil to do that. Especially if you're going to be using a chisel to get down there or a handsaw. These are going to be the preferred method over a pencil for sure, because that's already a groove for your handsaw to fit into. So that's pretty handy. And if you like more traditional styles of woodworking, then these are fun to use. So those are options. I'll put links to those in the description down below as well. All right, the next thing I'm going to talk about are calipers. You really need to have a set of calipers. Digital calipers are the easiest ones to use. You'll just turn the caliper on. You'll run this all the way closed, you'll reset it to 0, and that's reset to 0. These are really accurate calipers. You don't need to buy expensive calipers. I think you can get a good set for 20 or 30 bucks. Calipers are nice. Let's say I have to run a line in at a certain distance, and it's not easy to get. I have to be real precise, and it's not easy to get necessarily with this. So with the calipers, let's say if it had to be 1.15 inches, I can just run this over until I hit 1.15. You can see the numbers increasing on me there. So 1.15 inches. This is something pretty precise. And here's the nice thing about calipers. So this is 1.15 inches. So that means from here to here, inside to this, that's 1.15, and that means from here to here, outside to outside, that's 1.15, and that means the depth here, how far down that goes, that's also exactly 1.15. So all calipers will measure in 3 different locations. They'll measure an outside, they'll measure an inside, and they'll measure a depth. Okay, so this is going to be the amount that I want this to cut at, 1.15. So I can jump back over to my square, just loosen up my square, and I'll push the calipers back until this just touches right there. Then I can close that back, and that's 1.15. And I don't have to try to read these numbers here. I've got it dialed in to the 1,000th of an inch or 100th of an inch with that, and then I can come along and I can mark that with my pencil that way. So that's a nice way to use the calipers. Calipers are really handy. You might have a nut or bolt, you don't know what size it is, or diameter or something, you don't know what size it is, you just simply check it with the calipers. Or you might have a slot, you don't know how wide the slot is in your wood, you might check this with calipers. Or you might have a hole drilled, you don't know how deep the hole is, so you might check that with your calipers. So calipers are good to have. You should definitely have a set of calipers. in your tool arsenal. I'll put a link to a couple of different pairs. I usually buy the Mitutoyo calipers. I think these are about the best. They're not outrageously priced, but they're definitely more expensive than a lot like the eye gauging. I'll put a link to a couple of different price ranges of calipers in the description down below. So a compass is another tool that might not immediately come to mind, but it has a lot of really nice uses in woodworking. It will create arcs, round over corners, and of course it'll make circles, which is nice. But if I want to make an arc from here, let's say, I can make my location, tighten up the calipers, and then we just make a nice uniform arc. So the compass is nice for making things like this, and the compass won't set you back much money. Any compass will do. It doesn't have to be expensive. They all work the same. Doesn't matter if you buy a $50 pair or a $3 pair. So I would definitely invest, get a compass, put that in your toolkit. Okay, so then it comes to measuring, and we obviously measure with tape measures. I see a lot of people in their wood shops, they've got these, 35-foot, 40-foot tape measures. Nobody's building a piece of furniture that's 35 feet long. So a 16-footer is more than you will ever need, and I pretty much use these 9-footers for almost everything in the shop. They're small, convenient. The magnetic one side, I put them just about anywhere. I put them all over the shop, so I have plenty to check. But one thing I do is I keep one with me at all times, and when I'm working on a project, I do everything on that project from start to finish on that tape measure. That way, if the tape measure isn't perfect, for example, if I try to measure 10 inches and it's, a 64th of an inch over, it's not really a big deal, because every piece that I make is going to be made with that tape measure. So everything might be shifted a little bit, but everything has the same exact error, and it's shifted by the same exact amount. And so I'm going to have a piece that still works just fine anyway. So try to use the same tape measure for the whole job. That really helps. There's a ruler is another possibility that some people old school like rulers. There's some different rulers that are out there, and there's a couple that I do like. I do like these woodpecker ones. I like it. I talked about woodpecker in the last video, and I said I didn't like some of their stuff because it was overpriced. I was talking about their square specifically. They do make good tools, and some of the tools I like are these. For example, they have straight edges of different lengths. Here's one of the bigger ones. And these things are nice. Of course, you can check your wood. You can see how flat your wood is. That's important. You can also, if I need to make, let's say, a long bevel, I can't do that with any of my tools here, but I can certainly do that with a long straight edge. That's no problem. And that's something I frequently have to do. I don't use it a whole lot for measuring, but I might use something like this for layout. Let's say, for example, I need a uniform set of marks. The woodpecker scale here has what's called a center scale. So it's got a 0 here. And if I line that up on 0, and let's say I have to have holes every 1 inch, then I can just go this way, 1, 2, 3, 4, and same thing backwards. 1, 2, 3, 4. So the center scale is nice. I can mark things uniformly, equally on both sides of the 0, and the 0 happens to be in the center of the ruler. On this side, of course, it's just a regular measuring ruler. So most of the woodpecker rules are really nice. They come with center scales. And of course, you don't have to have a woodpecker's rule. There's a lot of straight edges that are available out there. This one's made by PowerTech. This one's really good. This also works for layout. You can use long layout lines, draw long layout lines with it. It works to check and see if your wood is square, to see if your tools are square, to see if your jointer tables are coplanar. So this has a lot of uses as well. So a good straight edge with some ruler function is also a handy thing to have. Okay, so to recap the essential stuff, the stuff that you need, marking gauges, of course, those are definitely optional. They're fun to play with. A good pencil, that's important, or a set of pencils, maybe something ideally that can do white ink, a compass, some calipers, a saddle square, a set of double squares, and maybe 1 or 2 straight edges, a shorter one and a long one. And that's really the bulk of what you need for doing 98% of all your layouts.